Lula never tires of embarrassing himself. It is clear how intellectually blind the current president is when the subject is not part of his backward ideology. This is Libertarian Vision, your source of decentralized and distributed information. Once again, the nine-fingered mollusk of the PT has spoken nonsense. This time it was at COP28, the United Nations Climate Change Conference. The speech in question took place on Friday, December 1st, when the president said that last year alone, the world spent more than $2.24 trillion on weapons, an amount that could be invested in fighting hunger and tackling climate change. There are many points to comment on about Lula's speech. Starting with spending on weapons, Lula implied that spending on weapons is not necessary. But in general, guns are necessary to maintain security, and people have a natural right to own and even carry a firearm. Going beyond natural law, even from the point of view of praxeology, i.e., the study of human incentives, it is argued that armed individuals are better able to protect themselves, deterring potential aggressors, and contributing to a reduction in the rate of crimes against people. However, it is essential to stress that this approach does not advocate an environment without control or anarchy in people's general concept, a land without laws. On the contrary, it suggests a change in the entities that have a direct interest in keeping the environment safe. In a truly free market, reputation and profit would go hand in hand with safety, different from the incentives of governments, which see an armed society as a danger to those in power. And this is the case with the Brazilian government. It's worth remembering that the disarmament statute came into force during the first Lula government in 2003. On this subject, we recommend the channel's video, The Importance of Arms Culture, link in the description. Another important point is that Lula could also be referring to government spending on weapons for national defense. However, at the moment, with so many conflicts arising in the world, even here in South America, with Venezuela seeking to annex Guyana's territory, it is clear that spending is also important at this time. You see, this channel is libertarian. We're not in favor of governments, much less governments arming themselves to fight wars. However, we recognize the need to defend ourselves in the event of invasions, and we cannot deny the reality. We don't live in an Ancapistan, so there must be ways to stop aggressors, even with the use of the state in this case. Two recent examples of this are Ukraine, which was invaded by Russia, and Israel, which was attacked by Hamas. It's curious to think how Lula would act if Brazil were invaded by another country. According to his recent statements on the case of other countries at war, such as Ukraine and Israel, he does not seem in favor of defense in the event of invasion. Now, moving on to the topic of poverty, Lula believes that the fight against hunger is done through the government, something like taking from the rich and giving to the poor, which the left often preaches. Contrary to what Lula suggests, an armed society is safer and offers better chances of a better life for the poorest, and can even indirectly reduce hunger. This all contrasts with the idea of welfarism, because unlike the measures created by Lula's governments, which often create ongoing dependency, the libertarian approach promotes autonomy. People become less poor as they have the freedom to undertake, innovate and prosper on their own merits, thus avoiding the cycle of political dependency. The richer and more prosperous companies become, the more likely it is that their employees will prosper too. The economy is not a zero-sum game, in which for one to be rich, the other has to be poor. Everyone can improve their lives thanks to capitalism. In fact, it's the state that promotes a zero-sum game, since the government isn't capable of producing anything, only of robbing people through taxes. In other words, in order for the government to have any money, society as a whole has to lose it by paying taxes. That's a zero-sum game. The pillars of freedom provide fertile ground for wealth and opportunity to flourish, creating a solid foundation for economic and social development. Brazil is a bad example of this, as there are many sudden and retroactive changes, as we are seeing especially with the latest STF decisions. This kind of positioning scares away investment capital and new companies, which would generate wealth and new jobs. Finally, on the environmental issue mentioned by Lula, well, he's not at the best moment to point out solutions, given that in the first year of his government, Brazil broke records for fires in biomes such as the Amazon and the Pantanal. In this context, libertarianism offers a unique approach to dealing with environmental issues, centering on the principle of private property and individual responsibility. Unlike centralized state approaches, which have historically resulted in environmental disasters, libertarianism seeks decentralized, market-based solutions. Private property serves as an incentive for preservation, as this property is seen as an intrinsic motivator for environmental preservation. When individuals own land and resources, they have a direct interest in keeping them healthy and productive in the long term. Poor environmental management can damage the value of the property, and there is therefore a financial incentive for responsible conservation. There is also individual responsibility, and this means that in a system based on individual freedom, actions that harm the environment can be treated as violations of property rights. Those who cause environmental damage can be held responsible and forced to repair the damage, creating a system of direct responsibility. We can't forget all the environmental disasters caused by the state, such as the Chernobyl accident in the former Soviet Union, the cesium-137 incident in Brazil, and also the case of the city of Maceió, which we have been following the outcome of in recent days. We have a recent video about this case entitled, "Maceió is at risk of soil collapse in several neighborhoods." The link is here in the description. These are examples of how a lack of individual responsibility and centralized management can lead to disastrous results. The state is the one that most damages the environment with public property, as explained in the tragedy of the commons. This tragedy of the commons is a concept that highlights the degradation of shared resources when no one is responsible for maintaining them. If a property belongs to everyone, then it doesn't really belong to anyone, and the incentive is to exploit the resources to the maximum without worrying about the damage. Private property offers a solution, as the owners have a direct interest in preserving and using their resources in a sustainable way, unlike the state, where public property ultimately belongs to everyone, but no one is responsible for taking care of it. We libertarians rely on market solutions and innovation to tackle environmental challenges. Competition between companies in a free market can encourage more sustainable practices. Since consumers value environmental responsibility, there may be companies that specialize in environmental regulation, for example, to check whether company X complies with environmental rules Y, and thus be able to receive a seal of environmental preservation. What's more, it's in the interest of the regulatory company that its seal is valuable. This is why there is an incentive to give the seal to those who really obey the rules and don't give in to bribes, because if they do, they will certainly be excluded from the market because the seal is unreliable. To find out more about this, we recommend the Ankapsu Classic video, "Will Waste Production End Planet Earth?" Link in the description. So if Lula wants to preserve the environment and fight poverty, he should leave it to private enterprise and stop levying taxes that only hinder Brazil's economic development. We know that this will not be Lula's path. We are ending 2023 with a massive increase in taxes, a deterioration in public security, more restrictions on access to weapons, and a downturn in the economy. Even with all the increase in government spending, Brazil's GDP grew by less than 1%. And that's just the beginning. We have 3 more years to go. All that's left to do is make the L and try to protect your wallet from all the robberies to come. Thank you for listening. This article was suggested by Chico Picadinho, written by Yakisokiso, proofread by JJ Liba, narrated and produced by Paulo Wesley. Write articles yourself. Visit visãolibertaria.com. If you liked the video, share it on your social networks. If you want to be notified of other videos, subscribe to the channel and then click on the bell button. See you next time.